She speaks French fluently. She has a character which is sweet and ironic. She has the spark of genius. She is wild. And she is the future. She sets fire to the furniture. She has bursts of anger over nothing, which means that she has to be confined to a straitjacket. She drinks champagne at 8 a.m. in the morning. She is dangerous. Welcome to Extraordinary Stories Podcast. Hey, how are you? Are you well? Are you good? I am. Lots and lots of cannibal chat going on from the last episode. I mean, it was a bit gruesome. I think it might be the most gruesome I've ever... I feel really bad. I should have actually said in the beginning that it was going to be that kind of gruesome, because a lot of you got in touch to say I was actually eating my dinner when I was listening to this episode and I had to stop. So I should have really given a food warning. So I'm sorry. I think it's the lips in the fridge part of that story seemed to stay with quite a lot of people. Yeah. And this is the other thing. On social media, I have really been laughing. I won't go on at the start of every episode, of course, about the beginning music. I won't do that. Just let me mention this one more thing that really made me laugh. So in that beginning intro that you've just heard, I say, gather round, I'm going to tell you a story. And it's only, this is brilliant, it's only a year and a bit down the line that people are coming to me going, I never realised that's what you actually said. So, someone thought I was saying, get a room, I'm going to tell you a story, which I'm definitely not saying. But the best is, someone else was hearing, get aroused, I'm going to tell you a story. Now, I can assure you, I was not saying, get aroused, I'm going to tell you a story. Can you imagine? Right, okay, everyone, I want you all to be really nice and aroused at this point. Everyone, ready to go. Let's talk crime. Let's talk murder. No, it's definitely gather round. Anyway, okay, enough of that. I'm going to do the shout-outs, and then I'm going to get to the short story of this week. Ashley Black. Hello, Ashley. Thank you for sending me some stories. I appreciate it. Ashley Adams. Oh, another Ashley. Hello, the Ashleys. Ashley Adams. Hey, how are you, Ashley? I hope you're well. Alexis Mariani. Now, I hope that's the right way I've said it. Thank you so much for your review on the Facebook page. It was so lovely. It was so lovely. It just was overwhelmingly lovely. Thank you, Alexis. William Holborn. Hello, William. How are you? And Polly the Poodle. Yes, I'm now doing dog shout-outs. So, shout out to Polly the Poodle, whose owner is Marie Burns Sullivan. So, hey. Hello to you all. Hello to everyone. So I don't know which category this story falls into. I mean, there's definitely crime involved, but there's also just so many of the factors that I like to talk about in some of the stories that I tell all sort of come together in this one person's story. The story is, and I didn't know this when I started, it is littered with names that you will know. And the more and more research I was doing, I couldn't believe the more names that we all know were dropping into the story. Okay, well, I hope you enjoy it. Are you ready? Okay, let's go. We are dealing with the decline of someone who held so much promise, who had such a spark of genius, and the absolutely tragic life that she lived. Let's start in 1907, when James Joyce and his wife Nora gave birth to their daughter Lucia Joyce. Now, James Joyce, when I said that, if you're thinking James Joyce as in literary James Joyce, as in the one of the world's most famous ever authors, the most celebrated figures in history, then you're right. It's that James Joyce. It's James Joyce who wrote Ulysses, Finnegan's Wake, and to this day is still considered to be one of the greatest authors that ever lived. So, James, a young man, and his wife Nora, they had been married a few years. They already had one child, a son, who was aged about 4. They had a second, and that second was Lucia. I must just say before that, Nora, before she became Nora Joyce, obviously when she married James Joyce, her maiden name was Barnacle. What a ridiculous name. Nora Barnacle. Like somebody's having a laugh with that. Come on. So James and Nora, they had enjoyed, before their kids came along, they had enjoyed a very fruitful, shall we say, sex life. Now, this is not really to do with the story, but I will just tell you this anyway. There were letters sent between James and Nora in the early days of their relationship, which are available to find online, but I would recommend caution if you're going to look at these letters. They are so sexual. They are so graphic. Now, my plan here was, I thought, just to set up who James and Nora were as a couple, what I might do is read you little extracts. Nah, can't do it. Can't. I swear to God, I swear this podcast would be shut down if I was to read the letters between. I mean, it really more, if I'm honest, coming from the James side of things. In later years, so many people have tried to get injunctions and court cases happening to get these letters to stop from being published. But we live in the age where when something's out on the internet, it's too late. So the letters are out there if you want to find them. But I would tell you right now, I can handle a lot of stuff. These letters, whoa, they are fucking graphic. They go really dark. Yeah. So, James Joyce, yes, one of the most wonderful celebrated literary figures. Him and Nora, what a pair of hornbags. The two of them were... it was all about sex. It was all about sex. Anyway, that's not really got anything to do with the story, but I just thought I'd tell you that was they lived, this kind of like really passionate, heated sexual life when they were a young couple. So they've now got 2 children. And when Lucia was born, the very first thing that the doctors noticed is that she appeared to be born with a slight squint in her eyes. So her eyes didn't quite focus forward entirely. One was kind of going in another direction. So nothing to, be necessarily too concerned about, but that's what it was. Her dad, James, he from a young age had worn a patch over his eye. Not like a pirate's patch, but more just like, it almost looks like a monocle, but with a strap attached to it. So he had always kind of worn that because he himself had, I think they termed it a lazy eye. So his eye was kind of going in a different direction. So, James, when Lucia came along and was a baby and had, her eyes going in different directions, he just thought, well, that's fine because that's what I was like. Apart from that, she was physically perfect. And James Joyce, he absolutely loved his daughter. He built a very close bond with her instantly as soon as she was born. So the family decide that they're going to move to Paris to live. James Joyce at the time is writing as much as he possibly can. But what that meant for the Joyce family was that they didn't really have a steady income. Money was extremely tight. And sometimes James Joyce would have to disappear for a few weeks to go and meet with different literary agents or go away for a period of writing. And that left Nora with the 2 kids. Now at age 3, Lucia started displaying signs of just being a very difficult child. I'm quoting here, but they said that she had neurotic traits. Not quite sure what that means in a 3-year-old, but she was displaying this kind of behaviour from about age 3, where she would sometimes switch between being a really happy child. She could be social, she could be outgoing, and then that would change in a heartbeat and she would suddenly disappear into herself and speak to no one. At times when she was young, she got overly angry and would scream her head off about things that nobody in the family could quite understand. What was causing this much upset? And I know that 3-year-olds throw tantrums and that kind of happens, but this was on like an extreme level. This was like she was inconsolable when she threw these tantrums. And so the Joyce family were really starting to consider the possibility that they might need to involve a doctor in this situation. So eventually James says, right, I think we're going to need a doctor to just have a look at Lucia and just check that everything's okay. Lucia at age 7 was diagnosed with schizophrenia. A doctor at the time said she's schizophrenic, and this is why she's 1 minute absolutely fine, and the next you don't know what you're going to get from her at all. This explains away all of these behaviours. I think important to bear in mind, this would be like 1912, 1913. Maybe that, I'm not saying she wasn't schizophrenic, I'm just saying that was the label given to it very quickly, and it was the sort of, this explains everything label, which don't think you wouldn't really get that now. You'd get a more kind of like, you might still be diagnosed schizophrenic, but you'd have a wider understanding of that, and there would be a lot more discussion around arriving at that decision. I sort of think maybe at that time it was like, no, this is what it is. That's why you're getting two sides of her. It's because of this. Okay, I'm not saying the diagnosis was wrong. I'm just saying it was a very black and white situation of she's schizophrenic. That's it. Case closed. Done. Wipe my hands of the situation. That's what she is. So she had a really rough and turbulent childhood because whatever was going on for her emotionally and mentally was just causing her family a lot of stress. And they didn't have a lot of money. James Joyce was still trying to make his way as a writer. Nora was seriously struggling with her daughter. She was having major issues connecting with her daughter. She just couldn't really find, without getting all like poetic and thing about it, it's that idea of like an unconditional mother's love. Unfortunately, Nora didn't really have that for Lucia. She couldn't find that love in her heart to tolerate, to put up with, to accept that Lucia was different and was difficult. It just wasn't in her. Now Lucia's brother, who was just a few years older, Nora loved her son. She thought her son was the best thing in the world. She just couldn't extend the love that she felt for him to her daughter. At a young age, Lucia showed a real aptitude for dance. She would spend hours dancing, learning new techniques, trying new things out, and her family, they were happy for Lucia to do this because it meant that she was doing something physical that got her out of her head for a little while. It got her out of the place where she might have an episode, or she might start getting angry or displaying erratic behaviours. They were quite happy to let her dance because she was happy doing it. She would lose herself in dance for hours at a time. So through all of this, when she's 8, 9 years old, 10 years old, and she's causing the family a lot of anxiety, there is one person who's really on her side, and that is her dad, James. He has such a strong bond. I said that earlier on, but they have such a strong bond together. And do you know where that comes from? It comes from the place where James, he recognised something in his daughter that no one else in the family could see. He recognised that actually him and Lucia were very similar. He looked at her as a young child, and a lot of the things that she did, he recognised it in himself. And just sadly, no one else in the family could really see that. If Nora had to spend long periods of time alone with Lucia, this was extremely stressful because she just didn't know how to manage or connect with her own daughter. I find that really sad. It's such a shame for both of them in that situation. I don't really want to paint Nora as a villain, and I don't want to paint Lucia as a villain because neither of them were. But it's just so sad that a mother and a daughter just couldn't find that thing between them. There's family photographs, and I'll throw them up online. But there's photographs where Nora's like sitting down and she's got like Lucia on her knee, and she's got the brother standing by her side, and it's a bit haunting when you look at these photographs because it's like all three of them are staring at the camera. They look dead behind the eyes. It's so weird. Like, they're actually a bit haunting, these photographs, more than anything. It's a bit like, okay, what the fuck's going on in this weird family? They're just all just like looking at the camera with dead eyes. And you can almost see the way, just in the very way that Nora is holding Lucia, that there's no love, there's no fun, there's no joy, there's no, I don't know, it's just, you can really feel it from the pictures. James Joyce is finding success as a writer. He's now tipped to be the next biggest thing in writing. So the family are in Paris. It's the 1920s. And now Lucia, she's a bit older. She's verging on womanhood. As she's got older, her behaviours have never changed. The only thing that's changed is that she's given medication to help her schizophrenia. She's been given basically like doping medication to just chill it out. Essentially, that's what it is. I'm sure there's probably a very medical term for it, but really that's what it is. They've given her something that basically just calms her down. But don't know that the medication's really working. She is still quite violent towards her family at points. She still gets very aggressive and very angry. She becomes unreasonable at the drop of a hat. She goes through periods of depression where she just disappears into herself, and then she comes out of that and it's fueled with anger, and then maybe she has a week where she's fine, but everyone's always on edge around Lucia because they never know what's coming next. Really not an ideal situation for any of them. For Lucia, it's not an ideal situation because it's not being dealt with properly. For her family, certainly not an ideal situation. But here they are. It's the 1920s. It was Paris. And people that I've mentioned before on the podcast, like the dancer Isadora Duncan, who met a tragic end in her life. Isadora Duncan was at the height of her fame. Ernest Hemingway was publishing great books. Scott Fitzgerald was around. These are all people that I've mentioned before. Maybe I've got some bizarre obsession with these people that I don't actually know that I've got. I've just only realised that I've mentioned lots of those before. Anyway, this was the 1920s. It was Paris, and Lucia was right at the heart of it. Now, her dad was gaining lots of success as a writer, and this meant that she was actually at the beating heart of the centre of Parisian 1920s. And when she entered that world, when she went out into that world of clubs and bars, people loved Lucia because she was this enigmatic fireball of energy. People were so attracted to her because she had energy. When she was in a bar, she was loud. She had style. She was big. She really was just this absolute fireball. So in 1922 she began to seriously study dance, and she proved to be an amazing dancer. She was into the more kind of experimental style of dance. I suppose what you'd call these days contemporary dance, which I know gets a bad rap. It does get a bad rap. I don't really know if I know an awful lot about contemporary dance, but I know it gets a lot of shit thrown at it because it just looks like a lot of people waving their hands in the air and throwing their body about with absolutely no with absolutely no choreography involved. But I don't think that's true. I think there is. I think there's a lot of skill involved in it. But anyway, this is what Lucia was into. She wasn't into a ballet and anything formal. She wanted the cutting edge stuff, and so she studied for a short time under Isadora Duncan. She wanted the future. She wanted to be the next big thing in dance, and like I said, she was actually brilliant. She had so much skill. Lucia was entering contests, first of all in France, and then around the rest of Europe, dance contests, and she was winning them all. She was smashing it as a dancer. She was really at the top of her game. Now, at the same time that happened, her dad, James Joyce, had just published Ulysses, which is his biggest work. Anyone who's ever read Ulysses or knows anything about it will know it's one of those pieces of literature that's like, it cannot be touched. It's a masterpiece. I've never read it, but people actually began to joke at the time. Because Lucia was so good, people began to joke that actually James Joyce would go down in history remembered as the man who was the father of Lucia Joyce, and not the other way around, because she was so good. People actually thought that she might end up just eclipsing her father. So more than just really being a dancer, Lucia was kind of evolving into a bit of an artist. She was like making all her own costumes, and she was like putting on these shows that were like really modern, really contemporary for the time. Just, you know, like her own style, her own thing. I'm thinking like early Kate Bush vibes. You know, that kind of thing where it's like Kate Bush had that kind of thing of going like, right, so you're an amazing singer. Your voice is absolutely off the scale, incredible. But actually, she brought with it her own homemade costumes, her weird performances, her, like, I remember a Top of the Pops episode where she just like stares into the camera for the whole time as she's singing, looking really like slightly deranged the whole entire time. There's just that kind of like, and I know all these like your Lady Gagas and your Adriana Grandes and all these jazz, they all think that they're like, oh, so cutting edge and whatever, but actually, yeah, I think your Lucias of the time, they were actually doing this way ahead of anybody else. So throughout all of this, she still kept a really close relationship with her dad. Now, her mental health, it was up and down. It wasn't always perfect. There were dark days for Lucia, and there were dark things for her family to have to deal with, you know, when she would sometimes go into long periods of silence. So now someone else comes on the scene, and it's another name that many of you will know. It's the playwright Samuel Beckett. Now, anyone who knows anything about theatre, or if you know anything about plays, Samuel Beckett is heralded as one of the greats of playwriting. His works to this day stand the test of time. Every theatre in Glasgow, at least once every couple of years, has a Samuel Beckett festival to celebrate his works. So Samuel Beckett was a young man. He was only like 21. He wasn't quite the Samuel Beckett he was going to become, but he was only like 21, and he offered to come to James Joyce and help him translate his latest work into another language. He offered to help him to just, take that book and just translate it into something else. So he was about 25, and I think Lucia was about 23, and the two of them, they started a relationship. They got on very, very well straight away. They started a relationship, and, well, what's the best way to say this? I was going to say maybe she got it passed down from her mum and dad. She had inherited, we'll say that, from her mum and dad, a love of sex. It was known that Lucia had slept with plenty men around Paris. And Samuel Beckett and Lucia, they had a very, very passionate sex life for a year. At the end of that year of being together, Samuel Beckett broke Lucia's heart by telling her that actually he didn't want to be together anymore, and telling her that actually the real draw of the relationship, it wasn't her. It was actually the fact that he got to work with her dad. The fact that he admired James Joyce so much is why he had stayed, and not Lucia. He told her this was never really going to develop into love. This broke Lucia's heart. She went into a deep depression, which doctors at the time noted as a psychotic break. Now, slight left field comment at this point. But years ago, when I was a student, I used to work, I said this the other day on social media, I used to work in a kilt shop. Now, just to quantify that statement, Glasgow and Scotland are not full of kilt shops, I can assure you. Not everybody's running around wearing kilts, and there's not kilt shops everywhere. It just happens that there are 2, I think, in Glasgow city centre, and there's like a few in Edinburgh city centre. Anyway, I was 23, I was a student, and my job was to fit people for kilts. So that was fine. Anyway, I had a boss at the time who used to get really annoyed by the like 17, 18-year-olds that worked there, because there would be like sort of 17, 18-year-olds who would come in and just do the really the really shit jobs of just packing stuff up or like labelling things or whatever. Do you know, just like people who were just there for like their wee Saturday job or whatever. But they would always be really excited about life, as you should be when you're 17, 18. They would be like, oh, you know, can't wait to go out tonight. Oh, I'm getting all my mates round. We're going to have a few drinks. We're going to go out to the club and all that kind of stuff. And he would always be like really... He was only like, I would say he was like mid-40s. Used to always say, well, they're like that now. Just wait until they've had their heart broken. That'll change them. And it's kind of always stayed with me, this like weird statement that he would make all the time about them, like, they've never had their heart broken. That's why they're so happy. Okay, fine. And there is a grain, a very small grain of truth in there somewhere, in that once you've been through a heartbreak, you do understand the world differently. You do kind of protect yourself slightly differently, and you do. But I just always felt like, fuck, they're 17, 18. You know what I mean? They'd be like going, oh yes, can't wait to go out to the clubs tonight and get myself a shag. Brilliant. I'm just gonna like get some drinks and whatever. And there he was, like the fucking cloud of doom in the corner. Do you know what I always wanted to ask him? Who broke your heart? Who broke your heart? And when? And why is that your now view of... How is that you now see the world through people who've either had their heart broken or not had it broken? Anyway, sorry, weird tangent. We'll get back to it. So Lucia, having split up from Samuel Beckett, was in a really dark place. So, I mean, she's still sort of early, mid-20s. She goes into 2 more relationships and they don't work. One of them, it's totally shit for her. She's seeing a man for about 8 months, and at the end of the 8 months, he tells her, oh, actually, I'm married. I never told you this before, but actually, I'm married. And she thought this was the new love of her life. When he tells her that he is married, Lucia loses the plot. She batters the hell out of him because she is so angry. She goes from this very quickly to meeting a Russian man, and within 2 weeks, they're engaged. It was passionate, it was fiery, and then the engagement is off. It's at this point that Lucia begins to display really worrying behaviours, and they include what gets called violent sexual attitudes. Don't know if that was a term from the time, but violent sexual attitudes. Lucia was loud and vocal about how much sex she wanted to be having. So she'd go into Paris, bars and clubs, and announce that she wanted sex. She wanted it, but she made it clear as she shouted in bars. Well, she didn't shout like these words, I'm quite sure, but she shouted in bars she was only willing to have sex with men who had big ding-dongs. She then publicly announced she was a lesbian. Whether that's true or not, no one really knows. Aside from this, our family were becoming extremely concerned by her mental health, as were police. Lucia was going around Paris and attempting to set fire to houses and to flats at random. She always carried with her everything you'd need for an arson attack. And she would just find a house, walk up to it, and attempt to burn the place down. Thankfully, each of those fires was caught before any major damage was ever done or anyone died. But even though she was stopped by police, and even though police knew it was her that was doing it, it didn't stop her. She just continued to go around little bits of Paris and try and set fire to people's houses. Sometimes when the family would sit down for dinner, they would all be sitting there eating their food. Lucia would deliberately make herself sick at the dinner table and then vomit all over the table. I've got a vomit on table story, but I'll not tell you it now. She would read the obituaries in the newspaper, find the name of a dead person, and then send them a telegram. Sending telegrams to dead people. Okay. At this time as well, calls were coming into the house regularly from people who wanted to either congratulate James Joyce on the success of his novels, or, it might be coming from an American literary agent who wanted to just check some things. Lucia decided she was sick of the constant calls to the house for her father, so she cut all the telephone wires. The family had them reinstalled, and an hour after they were reinstalled, she cut them again. So her family are now at their wits' end, whether they don't know what to do, so they decide possibly a good idea might be to send her away just on a short trip somewhere else to some other family members who lived in Ireland. And that's what they did. They thought, bit of time to recuperate, bit of time to just get away, maybe that'll help her. It didn't. When she got there, to this cousin's house in Ireland, what she started doing was drinking champagne at 8 in the morning and then wandering through the streets of Dublin out of her face, steaming drunk. She would disappear for days at a time. So she's now 30 years old at this point. 30 years old, and given the talent that she has, and given the fact that her father is James Joyce, she was sleeping rough on the streets of Dublin because she was drinking and didn't know where she was. So she would just fall down and lie in the gutter for days at a time. Now, it was this going missing, this lying on the streets, that eventually made her family actually take some action. And they, at this point, went, okay, no, we need to put her into a facility for a short period of time. We'll just put her into a facility and we'll see if someone can help her out. So as if this story wasn't littered with enough famous figures, enter one more. Carl Jung, who's often referred to as the most groundbreaking psychologist in the world, the man who would eventually study under Freud. He was the doctor that was looking after Lucia. So when James Joyce took his daughter to an institution, Carl Jung was a young doctor at this point. I mean, no one knew at this point he was going to become one of the founding members of psychology. He was really early in his career, but he was showing signs of promise in psychology at the time. And so I think this is really interesting. James Joyce sits down with Carl Jung and he says, I understand a lot of Lucia's behaviour. I understand it because I think I display the same kinds of things. I can be erratic. I can be crazy sometimes. I can get really angry. So Carl Jung puts James Joyce through a few psychological tests and he declares, yeah, I think you both suffer from schizophrenia. But here's the difference. The difference is you are a genius. Lucia isn't a genius. Yes, she's fierce, she's intelligent, she's smart, but she's not got your genius level. And so that is the difference between father and daughter. James Joyce asks him, so I'm right? I am right. We swim in the same waters. And Carl Jung says, yes, but where you swim, she drowns. Lucia was an embarrassment to the family. James Joyce was now a celebrated writer, and his daughter was creating havoc everywhere she went. By age 33, Lucia had been in 7 different institutions throughout Europe. Her family were paying something in the region of 3,000 francs a year for Lucia's treatment. Remember I said earlier on she liked making costumes when she danced? When people would go and visit her in the asylum, I love this because I think even though she's suffering from all this, she's still an individual. She's still trying to be who she wants to be. She would not be wearing the... I don't mean uniform. What's the thing? Yeah, she wouldn't be wearing like the garments that they made her wear as a patient. No. Instead, she customised everything. So she would add some sleeves where there weren't sleeves. She would cut, it short so that her legs were on show. And I like that idea that she just wanted to be an individual within that. She didn't want to just be another patient in an institution. There's a really difficult time for the family when they think that they can bring Lucia home. Now, just to go back to Nora, her mother, you'll remember I said there was no love lost between these two. They bring Lucia home for a family birthday party, and within 10 minutes of being home, she picks up the heaviest chair that she can find and she throws it across the room, smashing her mother to the ground. And unfortunately, it's back to the institution instantly for Lucia. She just hates her mother. She absolutely hates her. So James Joyce is paying more and more and more money for doctors to examine his daughter. And she ends up back in the hands of Carl Jung. Now, James Joyce doesn't really believe in what Carl Jung is doing for his daughter. He doesn't really think that he's giving her the best psychological treatment that she could be getting. I don't really know what James Joyce was... I don't really know what his idea of the best treatment was, but whatever it is, he thinks that his daughter isn't receiving it. And it's a really difficult one because, I've never been in this position, but in lots of ways it's stated that actually James Joyce's interference in his own daughter's treatment was actually a big massive part of the problem. He seemed to always have questions for doctors. He seemed to always be problematic with doctors. And yeah, he would say things like, I'm willing for new treatments, I'm willing for new medications to happen, but he also doubted every doctor who was trying anything. And it's one of those really tricky things where you have to go, you might be this amazing figure in literature, but you don't know medicine, you don't know psychology, so take a step back and let us do our job. Just let us do our job. And it was it was coming from the fact that he loved Lucia, his daughter, so much. He just wanted to see a resolution to the situation, but actually him constantly fucking stepping in with doctors meant that they couldn't actually develop a proper relationship with Lucia, because her dad was this figure that was looming in the background all the time. He just couldn't step back. And Carl Jung, who, you know, is one of the greatest minds that we've ever known, eventually said to James Joyce, I need to step back from this. I can't do this anymore because you're so in the way. I can't get a bond with her as her therapist and her as therapy. I don't think that's the word, but I'm making that word up. As I am the doctor and she is the patient, we can't find a bond. I can never help her because you are constantly there doubting what I'm doing. In 1935, Lucia was moved to an institution on the outskirts of Paris. And in 1941, 6 years after that move, her father, James Joyce, died suddenly. He dropped down dead out of nowhere. With her father dead, Lucia Joyce remained in that one institution for the next 47 years until her own death. In the 47 years that she was in that institution, her mother never visited her once. No family came to see Lucia Joyce in almost 50 years. It's heartbreaking, but do you know who were the people that did come and see Lucia? Not regularly, but who did come and visit her? It was the people who liked her father's work. It was the fans of Ulysses. It was the fans of James Joyce. They would make these huge journeys to come and to visit Lucia. I mean, she didn't know them. She didn't know them from fucking Adam. These just people rocking up to the asylum. But at least they were coming to visit. Her own mother lived only a few miles away and never once went to see her daughter. Lucia had become a chain-smoking, crazy liability. She was an on-the-edge character the whole time. She was continuing to set fire to things in the institution. And there was nobody, not one person, since her dad died, nobody was fighting the fight for Lucia anymore. Her mum is the stuff of much speculation. James Joyce wrote in his private diaries before he died, they were found after his death, that he believed that Nora was actually incredibly jealous of her daughter. He believed that was the problem between mother and daughter, that Nora could never properly love Lucia because actually she looked at her and she saw that even beyond the, you know, diagnosis and all of those things, she actually saw a spark of something in her, and it threatened her as a mother because she thought, I don't have that. And it's a very complicated, I'm saying all this and I don't really know it, but it's a very complicated situation where you have a father and a daughter who both recognise that in each other they share something. Now, it's terrible that the thing that they share is mental health, and the thing that they share is, you know, extremely erratic behaviour, but it's something that they share. And if you don't have that, and actually you're just looking at your daughter's behaviours without any recognition of, oh god, I get where that's coming from because I'm actually the same, then yeah, that will distance you. Nora had no time for Lucia. What she cared about was the son that she'd given birth to, Lucia's older brother. She loved this boy. She idolised him. She thought he was just the best thing in the world. Her daughter didn't care. In an institution, fine, leave her there. That was her opinion. I think the fact that 47 years passed without her going to see her daughter once is pretty tragic. Lucia spent a long time in the institution, long periods of time, in a straitjacket because her behaviour was just out of control. Never once did she get a Christmas card or a letter from her family. You can see these photographs, and I'm going to try and find them and put them up because I think they're lovely actually. I think there's something really sweet about them. In the times when she wasn't in a straitjacket, like I said, Lucia liked to, fashion her own costumes. She liked to do her own thing. There's images of her in the asylum, and she has fashioned her clothing into some kind of uniform, and she would dance in the wards. She would create these choreographies and she would dance for all the nurses. I mean, I'm pretty sure the nurses just looked on and thought, oh my god, what a nut job. But actually, what was really happening in that asylum was that there was someone who had a real possibility of being amazing in her lifetime. But the circumstances, the time, and her life never allowed that to be. And so ends the story. Okay. Well, hope you enjoyed it. Get in touch and let me know what you think about Lucia Joyce. If you haven't done it already, join the Facebook group. Don't know why you wouldn't have done it already. Come on, sort yourself out. Keep sending your submissions for I Want to Be Shouty Man. All I want to do is hear you scream. Had quite a few through so far. Hilarious. Love it. So we'll get to hear those. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram. You can always get hold of me, Extraordinary Stories Podcast at gmail.com. So until the weekend, okay, goodbye.
It didn't affect me really one way or the other. I would imagine from the look on his face, let's get it on, let's do it, let's get it over. Let's get it on. Let's do it. Let's get it over.